Welcome to Throttle Stop Motorcycle Podcast, brought to you by Pandora's European Motorsports. Today, I have with me Katherine, who has traveled a good portion of the western side of the world on her BMW 1200 GS adventure. And today, she did a presentation for us that kind of talked about those travels. And do you want to kind of introduce what you did and talk about maybe like a 1 minute spiel on what this presentation was about?
Sure. My partner and I, we both have 1200 GSAs, and we left on the Pan American, although we spent a lot of time off the Pan American. We rode from Chattanooga, Tennessee, all the way to Ushuaia, Argentina, together on two bikes. And then we rode all the way back up to the Amazon and then to Buenos Aires, where we have now shipped our motorcycles to go to Africa next.
So, in summary, Chattanooga, southern tip of South America, and then back up to Brazil.
Mhm.
And then you shipped your bikes off, floated down the Amazon River,
Mhm.
ended up in, you said, where? Buenos Aires?
Mhm. Yep.
And then they're actually going to start again at the southern tip of Africa and make their way up. I guess you're going to go up like toward Egypt.
We're gonna go up towards Kenya and then kind of see where and how we're gonna get to Europe from
Okay.
there, through the Middle East or around somehow. We'll see.
Well, so the rest of this podcast is just going to be the presentation that she just gave for us. So hope you guys listen in and enjoy it.
Cut.
Okay. So if you can't hear me in the back, just let me know. Um, and this is kind of new for me. I used to be an outdoor educator. I'm used to talking in front of people, but not about this topic much. And I'm now a travel nurse, which allows me to have my time to go and do about a contract a year. And then I keep traveling on this trip. So can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Dad? Okay. Thank you. All right. So I met my partner Brandon 12 years ago in a hot spring in Idaho. And in the first 5 minutes that we started talking, I casually said, and I had just gotten into nursing school, it was a second degree for me, I'm saving my money to go around the world on a motorcycle, which pretty much meant I had $5 in my pocket. And I really didn't know what I was talking about. But I've wanted to do something like this forever. And so Brandon had the same dream and was like, who is this woman sitting with me at this hot spring? And so we hit it off, and we've been together now 12 years, and the dream is come true. I didn't even own a motorcycle. I walked into the old Pandora location in 2016, and I said, hey, my name's Katherine. I want to get a 1200, having never ridden a bike before. And what I appreciated about it now that I've had more experience at other dealerships is they never balked. They asked me some questions, they encouraged me from the beginning, and never ever dissuaded me or gave me any kind of negative feedback loop about wanting, and I didn't even say I want to do this trip. I was just excited about trying a bike. So I appreciate Pandora for that. And I know a lot of women are, getting more and more active in this sport. There's been many before me who have been amazing and are amazing. Um, but in my entire trip, Tennessee to Ushuaia, I met 9 women. So I met hundreds of men on bikes. And so it's definitely something that's growing, but also something that is not as common. Um, so my experience with this, my first year riding the bike, I put maybe 5,000 miles on it. I was just intimidated and scared. I was living here on Brainerd Road in Chattanooga in nursing school. I was working at Erlanger as a trauma nurse, and so I saw a lot. There's some nurses in the audience here. And so for me, riding a motorcycle was intimidating. And slowly over time, I started to gain more confidence and more experience. Um, my boyfriend, Brandon, said, you can look at that pretty bike in your garage, or you can actually start riding. And he challenged me to meet him. He lives in Boise, Idaho. I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the halfway point in between was Amarillo, Texas. And he said, I'll meet you there in 4 days. And so I did. And that was the beginning of me understanding my motorcycle and spending that time. It takes miles to get to know your bike. So we rode to Texas and then all the way up to Portland, Oregon, and all the way down Route 1. And I really was still dropping it at any time I pretty much stopped. But at least I was having fun. And we were camping out and I was learning so much. We were going to do this trip. Brandon has always dreamed of going around the world. So have I. But the reality of something that large is a pretty big endeavor. And so we were going to leave in 2020 and the world changed. And as a nurse, I was let go because I'm a surgical nurse, but then I went back to work pretty hardcore for quite a while. So we put this on the back burner. A lot of people ask me how we can finance this trip. Brandon owns our home in Boise, and during 2020, we built a apartment in the back garage that we also rent to travel nurses. So we rent both of those out while we're on the road, which gives us a $3,000 a month budget. So that's our budget every month, $100 a day for two of us. And that's the most common question I get is, how can you afford this? You must be rich. It's actually cheaper living on the road than it is to live on a daily basis with, working and bills and restaurants and food and all that. So that is the number one question we get asked. Prohibitively, we've met lots of people doing this. I've met people that are doing it for $25 a day, and I've met people who are doing it for no budget. So anywhere in between, if this is a dream you have, just start. So we didn't tell anybody we were going to Ushuaia. We started going. I don't know if this, okay. This is, when I look at this first picture of us and what I looked like in Ushuaia, which is the most southern point of South America, we look pretty green here, and I love it. This is in my parents' driveway the morning that we left. We had Christmas bows. We had just taken an off-road motorcycle course with Wendy Nissens and the BMW Academy the week before, and that was amazing for us to understand what we didn't want to do on this trip. We had the skill set to continue working on deep sand and deep gravel and deep mud, and that was going to come with time. But for us, it was a great beginning to understanding what we were going to get into, even though we didn't know what we were going to get into. So there's a few tears here. Mom putting an identification bracelet on my wrist with my call numbers. And my parents who are here. This is up on Sigma Mountain, and my dad's always said, I'm kind of known for doing unusual things. I've walked from Mexico to Canada solo. I've hitchhiked across Africa at 17. I became a nurse. That's kind of crazy. But my dad's always said, nobody's born with experience, and you have to take that into account on anything you undertake. So this is just some scenes of us going across the U.S. And, people can ask us about gear. People can ask us all kinds of questions. We're kind of known for being heavily overloaded. We're on two 1200s. We picked that on purpose for the ability to go fast when we want to, the ability to have comfort, also carry whatever we wanted. And you will see from Brandon's motorcycle, he calls it Yeti because it carries so much stuff. So that's us somewhere in Mississippi. And as we were going, we were starting to learn. People were really curious about what we're doing. People would often come over and ask us. And what's actually happening here is Brandon has a little box right there that he warms frozen burritos in on his exhaust pipe. This was our official first drop of the trip in Austin, Texas. We hadn't even gotten out of the country yet. We rented an Airbnb from a friend, went to the backyard, it had just rained, and the kickstand went straight into the ground. So there'll be a few photos here of us dropping the bikes because we do it all the time. So we were glad to get that one out of the way. We left in November of, I think it was 22, I think. And what I do is, as a nurse, I have to come back and work once a year for 3 months. Brandon is retired. So we make it work that I can come home and do a contract, and we'll do 6 to 8 months on the road. So we've done this trip so far in 3 sections. And we just, there's so much to see in the United States. And I think now that we've done more traveling, people always ask, does your list get shorter? Well, no, our list is getting longer because there's so much more to see. The other thing that is Brandon on this trip is he takes naps everywhere. So there'll be a few photos of him just napping randomly. People are often concerned that there's something wrong with him, but it only takes about 5 minutes and then he's refreshed. So this is our first border crossing into Mexico. We didn't take many photos. We were scared of border crossings. We had both ridden down Baja multiple times together. But, border crossings for us back then were places you don't take pictures, places you see a lot of military and a lot of guns and a lot of questionable activity. So we were always, there's pictures everywhere saying don't take, pictures with your phone. So that is literally the only photo I have of Mexico. when we crossed the border. Since we crossed around Christmas, it took us about 8 hours to cross the border. Normally, you can do it in under an hour, but there was just a lot of exciting activity with Christmas holidays at that time. So right away, you cross into Mexico and you learn driving's a little bit different. There's obstacles on the road anywhere. Um, they mark holes in the road with things like that. And that can be at 70 miles an hour on an interstate highway, and you'll see just the manhole covers gone. We call these, am I allowed to swear? We call these shit biscuits because they go across the road everywhere, and it's like driving on a jelly-filled donut. They're all soft, and the tires are too big to go in between them, so you have to hit them some way or another. There's obstacles on the road that make us uncomfortable, and there's a lot of fuel being transported usually nearby at those times. Things can fall off. There's river crossings. I mean, and this is just pavement, right? So we ended up, once we got a bit more experience, I mean, almost the whole country of Peru we did on dirt, which was great. So, but yeah, so a lot to see, a lot to be aware of. I have some vision issues, and so Brandon's often in the front, and we do talk back and forth, and he will often warn me about a stray dog, or I'll see that he can pass, and then he'll go and then tell me when to come, and that communication is extremely important. Something we also learned is that we aren't hardcore riders compared to people here. Everywhere we went, you see multiple people on bikes that just blow your mind with how well they can ride, because that is their only form of transportation. And it's just amazing. If you look closely, that other picture has 2 children in front of him. So, yeah. They use motorcycles for everything you could imagine. And it's nice to see that there's such a motorcycle culture as soon as you cross the border into Mexico. We also learned that they burn a lot of trash in a lot of developing countries through Central America. So that was also exciting, where, you know, sometimes you lose visibility. We actually had an airplane drop water on us on one of the highways because there was a forest fire on the right side. So that was very exciting too. So of course it's not on camera. And you also learn just there's a lot of people. Tuk-tuks are everywhere, which are what on the far left photo there. Lots of people as well. And so, you know, if I didn't know how to ride already, I was definitely learning and working on my skill set. Something else that was starting to develop was our culture of communicating with people we didn't know. The culture of motorcycle riders around the world, whether it's Horizons Unlimited or whether it's Pan American World Travelers, it's pretty amazing. So we had never met Marco. Marco is president of the Long Distance Iron Butt Association in Mexico, and he also builds sidecars, and he runs a hostel. So we stayed at his house. And just the community started. Through him, I ordered tires that were hand-delivered to me in much further south in Mexico by a man who showed up with amazing Anarchy Adventure tires. Just the contacts and the strings that you kind of start to learn and that start protecting you is really important. WhatsApp is a community. It's a texting forum. And for Central America, there's a group that is about 500 riders right now, currently. And for South America, there's one with about 700 riders in it. And all it is I'm in Nicaragua. I blew my spokes because I went off the road. Where can I go for help? And so through this network and community, you start learning how to help each other. Oh, I was there last month. This is the mechanic I used. Or when we went through Bolivia, they were having gas shortages and they were not selling fuel to foreigners. Thankfully, we have a bit on the side of the street in Mexico. And what we were also starting to learn is you can fix anything and you can find anything. You just have to figure out how to ask for it. So that has been essential for us keeping our bikes upright. And this is the gentleman who did it in front of his house. And then he showed us his antique car collection, which was great. As we were going along, we camp about 20% of the time. We do stay in Airbnbs. With traveling with 2 people, a lot of times we can save money by getting an Airbnb or a hotel, because you also get breakfast. But for a single person, they're not as efficient to have that cost. But for 2 of us traveling together, we can often do that. But it's always important to have secure parking. With these bikes, we always want to make sure that they are safe.
Did you have to obviously get the Airbnb
We book them all the day before. Yeah, so when we first started on this trip, we didn't even have navigation on our our handlebars. We were handwriting directions of where we wanted to go and putting it on our tank bag. And as I said, that's what's important is anybody can do this. We started out thinking we kind of knew what we were doing, and then you grow and you learn and you begin to figure out what's best for you. Um, we use iOverlander every single day. That's another app that tells you where you can camp, where good restaurants are, what there is to see and do. And so I slowly over time became the logistics person for our trip. Brandon's fluent in Spanish, so he was the guard dog. And I did all the logistics and kind of the food, and then also, figuring out Airbnbs and hotels and things like that. So um, I started napping because it was really hot. So again, I think the number one question we often get asked too is, weren't you afraid in Mexico? No. At times, there's definitely areas that you're going through that you need to be aware. But our rules are, don't drive at night, don't drink and drive, don't go super fast for joy because it ends up not fun. I'm a trauma OR nurse. All the gear all the time. And I'm forgetting my fifth. Oh, listen to your funny belly. If either one of you feels funny about something, you don't challenge that person to say, come on. You listen to it. And we've had moments where we realized we made the right call because of that. So we went through Mexico kind of quickly because we knew we would be coming back. We know we're living in Idaho. I live in Boise, Idaho, that we'd be able to come back and enjoy Mexico more thoroughly. You could spend 5 years there and not even scratch the surface for the food and the things you can see. But our big experience in Mexico was we went to the monarch butterfly reservation. It's not a reservation, but it's a park. And this was also our first time kind of doing some off-road, which was really fun on big, heavy bikes. These are actually the monarch butterflies. They're in big clumps. To get there, it's a protected reserve, and they come back on Day of the Dead, Halloween, and Mexicans believe that it is their ancestors coming back. They stay there for a few months, but they go north and migrate, and they have one cycle and another cycle. They have babies and keep going. They don't come back to this exact same spot till 1 year later, 5 generations later, and they always return to this place. We happened to go through when they were there. We're like, let's go. So to get there, we rode way up high. We then had to take a horse about 3 miles. We then hiked maybe a half mile, and then you're not allowed to speak because they don't want you to disturb the monarchs. We got there really early in the morning, and when the sun hits them, they start to flap. And so we were in this reserve with millions of butterflies, and that was the first time I kind of realized this is going to be something, this whole trip is going to be something that we're really blessed to be seeing. So these are all the clumps everywhere. So I also learned as a woman, girls want to see me ride and they get so excited. And so every chance I get, even if it's police officers, I get them on my bike because I want them to see that they can too. And also a woman, A, riding a motorcycle, but B, a 1200 is a big deal. A lot of times I would take my helmet off and I'd be with 6 or 7 different male riders and they'd say, you're a woman. And yeah, one day at a time, right? Brandon also had a lot of little kids sit on his bike. Brandon carries extra tires because he thinks it looks good. We have not used them yet. They are currently being shipped to Africa. And more falls. Yeah, that's just part of it. This was our first border crossing for real after Mexico. We went into Guatemala. What happens at that point is that we lost cell phone reception because our plans for Verizon were only through Mexico. And we also, it was our first time really exchanging money. It was our first time trying to get a SIM card. It was our first, and it's a pretty interesting border crossings. It's literally people at the gate just waiting on you to arrive. And it was an exciting experience for us. We were pretty intimidated. We also learned about fumigation. They spray your motorcycles with chemicals. And I was carrying 4 apples on my tank bag that day. So I did not eat them because I don't know what they're actually spraying you with. Things about traveling like this is you want to see where you are, but you can't see everything. But traveling and experiencing things. We started taking a lot of ferries that were really interesting. This was part of the BMW community in Guatemala, and this gentleman bought his first motorcycle the same year I did. It was a scooter, and now he's got like 4 1200s in Guatemala City. But he took us under his wing for 3 weeks and rode us all over Guatemala. And that's where I learned that I needed to up my game. They cut handlebars shorter in Guatemala, and nobody has side panniers because they are lane splitting all the time. And there's so many trucks on the road and so many potholes that you have to be on it. I couldn't keep up with. Brandon was excited. He had a great time. I was struggling because for me, in my back of my mind, what I'm always thinking about is the consequences of what could happen, especially in a foreign country. But I got my master's degree riding pretty much in Guatemala. By the time you get to Peru, you get your PhD because in Peru, they are actively trying to get you off the road. Sorry, mom and dad, but they are often pushing, the lorries and the trucks are pushing motorcyclists off the road. And there's a lot of llamas and alpacas. And so things are very different in Peru. And also we were in high mountain mud. We didn't go down to the ocean at all. We were in the mountains the whole time. So we had a great time in Peru, but with hindsight. So a great example, this is what we were riding on. And we were starting to get a little bit more extreme. I don't want to say extreme, but just more remote. We were starting to get more comfortable with what we wanted to try. And the community was growing for us. Alejandro, the man on the far left, introduced us to a bunch of his friends, and we rode together for 3 or 4 days. They are in the top kind of 1% of Guatemala. And for us, it was really interesting riding with people with a different socioeconomic experience. This hotel we stayed at, I remember getting fish and looking out, and these kids were out there fishing in fishing boats. And I said to Alejandro, "What are they fishing for?" And he said, "Bales of Coke." And I said, "What?" And the currents there go perfectly all the way up to the US. And so overnight, they are dropping drugs on airplanes into the water. And here I'm like, this is beautiful. What fish are they cooking? And that's when you start to kind of see more of, we left town that day and you see young children with larger guns. And we've gone in a lot of variety of places. And I think we have had amazing experiences and have not had problems. And there is a culture in various communities that are there to survive and exist, and they do what they can. So we came into Costa Rica, and Brandon dropped his bike at the border just to say hello. And we learned quickly we couldn't get into Costa Rica. Brandon, before we left, had said, "I don't need my original title." And I said, "You might want to have your original title with you, not just a copy." And we learned there they were not going to let us in the border at all because we didn't have the original. So we had to hire a lawyer at the border. 5 hours later, in the dark, he showed up with an entire hard drive that he was carrying to get all of our paperwork sorted out. And we were actually allowed into Costa Rica. But it became about an $800 mistake through then having to contact the embassy in Costa Rica to say, we need a title. They said that's a state problem, not a national problem. And it required a lot of logistics for us to be able to get this sorted out, knowing that we should probably have the original all the way through. So that is not my "I told you so" smile. That is a very supportive smile. I was bringing snacks. I always find on border crossings you want to have snacks and water. So I'd carried this all the way from Tennessee from the dollar store. So this was the lawyer. He worked on our paperwork. And this is Brandon getting it stamped through. And then it was dark. What's our #1 rule? Don't ride in the dark. But we were able to actually get to a campground within about 5 miles of the border. That was beautiful. So something else about traveling is trying all the food everywhere. It's important. I think part of the experience is to try things that are weird, right? And unusual, and you discover so much. So this is just an example of some of the markets that we've seen all the way down, even all the way, well, not to Ushuaia, it's pretty cold in Patagonia, but all the way down. These are crickets. We did a language class in Mexico, and they sell a lot of crickets there, and they mix it with hot sauce and peanuts. This is me trying that. And just the fruit and the sweets and, things we didn't even really know what they were. But, and the meat and braais and cooking, asados are a big, big thing. Hotel rooms, we often would have, pretty limited. I was always carrying some oysters, some cheese, some peppers, and some hot sauce and crackers, and we're good to go if we don't want to go out once we get somewhere. So, this was a classic example. Luckily, we haven't gotten sick a lot on this trip. This was in the banana plantations approaching Panama, and Brandon had been feeling really poorly. He had been sick a few times in the morning and was feeling good enough to keep going. And so we're within about 4 miles of the Panama border from Costa Rica. And I was like, Brandon, we don't have pictures of the banana plantations yet. So this is the first photo where he's all happy. And then the second photo, he's not feeling that good. And then the third photo, he is, and it's about 100 degrees. He is in the plantation getting water poured on the back of his head. What was sweet is there was a little boy who was about 7 or 8 years old who rode by and saw us gringos sitting there with these giant bikes that are worth a lot of money. And he offered us his juice box because he was worried about us. So, yeah. Panama City, wow. At this point, the Darien Gap, there are no roads that connect you Panama to Colombia. So where it tapers down, you either have to take a boat. Everybody's heard about the stall rot if you motorcycle at all. They stopped doing that in 2020. So now the only option is to air freight or ship in a shipping container. We chose to air freight. At this point also, we knew if we were going to spend the amount of money it would cost to go across the Darien Gap, that we were going to continue on to Ushuaia. For us, it was an evaluation point of, are we having fun? Are we getting along? Is this what you think the trip's going to be like? How can we improve on this next section? And do you want to keep going together? So we keep choosing yes. We used Overland Embassy. They're fantastic. There's 2 companies you can hire to get you air freighted across the gap. They send big rigs like Unimogs and trucks and all sorts of things too. But we sent our bikes. What we also learned here is the culture of stickers is really large in Latin America, and everybody wants to exchange stickers. And so we started getting our first sheet of stickers. Marco, the man in Mexico, designed them for us. And I have some here if anybody wants them. So we stick them everywhere. But I'm also a leave no trace person, so I always ask permission first. So our bikes are being flown. I've never had my name on a sign before. It's right there. And it was, masking up for the flight. These are the bikes arriving with DHL. It's the classic. I mean, we were happy, you could tell. This was a huge moment for us. And that day, the third GS is a friend of ours we met that day who was lost. We got lost the morning of our day shipping, and we had to have a police escort get us to Overland Embassy. It's a long story. But he was lost too. And so we ended up meeting Federico that day, and we motorcycled with him on and off all the way to Ushuaia. So, but yeah, lots of pictures of the bike because it looks hardcore. And then we spent all day doing paperwork and trying to be goofy because it is a long day. So this was us getting through. And then boom, you're in Colombia. Has anybody here been to Colombia? It is the best and our most favorite country of this entire trip so far. I would say 40% of the people on the road are on motorcycles. And the culture, I mean, every time we went by, people are fist bumping you and yeah, and it's just so fun. They all want to like buy you tea and coconut water and things. So, and the riding is amazing. That's where it started to get a little bit different for us again. The signs when it says the road ends and it's just gravel. This literally is where we had to go next to this big truck. Mom, don't look at these photos. I don't know where she is. But when you're cruising along and you come around the corner and there's landslides, you have to be able to anticipate. The roads also get really amazing. Look at this over here. And we started really seeking out different terrain because we were starting to improve. So, and Colombia is just amazing. And the fruit stands, of course. So, this was a landslide. We'd been waiting 3 days for the street protest to open up. We were really close to the border in Ecuador, and there had been some protests happening in a small village. And we heard they were opening up the border, the protest area for 1 hour. And so we'd waited 3 days for that to happen. And we got within 5 miles of that point. We'd driven an hour to get there. And there was a landslide that happened 10 minutes prior. So we had to turn all the way around and go back, and then we had to drive 6 hours around to that same point we were trying to get to. And at that point, we'd booked a flight home, so we were feeling a little bit stressed. But we love Colombia. Brandon napping. So hot springs everywhere too. And what we learned in Colombia also is the motorcycle culture, like I said, is amazing. And there are so many good shops everywhere. We're getting less and less BMW certified Motorrad places. We had a full detail done by Pandora before we left. It was fantastic. And we needed some more work done when we got here. And these are all just independent mechanics. And the labor is amazingly cheap. And so I had a full day of work done on my bike, 4 people looking at my bike. They found parts for me from all over the city, and the whole bill was $400. So, yeah, Brandon napping. Cross the equator. This is, Brandon napping. Yeah. So we were starting to choose more and more rural roads. We had met up with two other guys on a bike who were 25 they were Dutch, and they'd never ridden motorcycles before, and they bought matching bikes to do 4 months in the Americas. And we had so much fun with them because they didn't know what they were doing. And we kind of knew a little bit at that point, but they were game for anything, and they were so fun. So we traveled with them for about a week. So, and things started getting amazing. So, just stunningly beautiful and exciting. Roads just kind of disappear when they're that steep. So we definitely were learning how to communicate well. We camp about 20% of the time. During the night, we woke up to a roaring sound, and you can see this is all black. This was a forest fire in the canyon where we were. And I kept seeing this weird light through the tent, and I kept hearing what I thought was a semi coming up the road. And finally, I was like, I'm going to look what's going on. And the whole hillside was on fire. So that was exciting. We were fine.
You didn't start it though.
No. Okay. No. And then this is the main road in the high mountains of Peru. So, yes, especially with heavy bikes. And then there's amazing rides. There's something like 60 tunnels on this route. It's a single lane, so you honk whenever you go through because there are lorries coming the other way. It was never dangerous, Mom and Dad. And we started getting into some really high places. And it's just stunning to see people living in the way they've lived for hundreds of years in stone huts, wearing skirts and vibrant colors and herding alpacas. And it was amazing. So, and this was my famous drop because it was a 1-lane road. Brandon was in front. All I heard him say was stop. And I stopped and put my foot down, but the pavement ended right there. And so I put my foot down below and I just toppled over. So it was a full drop on the bike. And it was because there was a herd of alpacas coming the other way. Of course, they're not in the photo. And these 2 guys were so shocked they were coming the other way behind the alpacas that they insisted on helping me with my bike. And we exchanged stickers, and we're still in touch with them until today. So, so typical roads. So.
His bike fell over, just the 2 of you. Could the 2 of you get his bike picked up?
Yes. Yeah. Huh? We got along all the time. Oh, no, exactly. So, and again, I love seeing women and young girls that want to get on my bike. Lots of dogs. I started carrying dog food with me, and to us, we started learning that the indicative of how a culture treats their animals is what the street dogs look like. So I started carrying dog food, and then I got bitten by a dog in Peru. Very weirdly, downtown Lima, Peru, and this lady was walking her dog, and she said, "Watch out, my dog is vicious." And I went to the side of the road, and the dog bit me there. And she just walked off. So I had no way of asking her, did her dog have rabies? Has the dog been vaccinated, etc. So I debated about it for like 5 days. And then I decided, why am I not getting the rabies series? So I went ahead and got it, which involved us going to 3 different clinics over a 6-week period. And in a lot of rural communities, it's hard to find that vaccine. So,
rabies is 99% fatal.
Right. And you can show symptoms up to 2 years later, which I didn't know. So, but we still love dogs. So this was a classic moment for us. High mountains, I was in the front. I'm starting to get more of my front time. And Brandon, what was unusual about this for me is this concrete was sticking up, and you couldn't tell how deep it was. And at that point, I was saying, why don't we get out and walk it, right? And see how deep it is. And Brandon said, if you walk everything we're going to cross, you'll never get to Ushuaia. So I just went, and I made the wrong call and promptly went off the concrete slab into about knee-deep mud over there. And that involved Brandon getting off his bike. We'd never been in that situation before. We're kind of newer riders again, and lifting it up and cranking. He was covered in mud. And as this was happening on our two big adventure bikes, guess who rode by? But a family on a scooter with going to church with like white dresses on, and no problem at all. So, so this was the first day that we realized we really traveling with your partner has its pros and cons. And we were learning that we really needed to work on our communication at times because challenging situations, we react differently. Brandon tends to think everybody's out to hurt him, and so he's very on guard. I think everybody's out to love me unless they prove me otherwise. And so that works really well at times, and other times it creates some problems. Brandon thrives off of downtown traffic in Mexico City with 12 million people. I don't. Brandon will be riding, listening to music with a 35 millimeter camera, shooting pictures while he's talking to me about pointing out something up there on a skyrise, a big building. And I'm, everything I can do to make sure that we're not getting separated. And so we've learned, and we are still learning how to ride together, even after this time.
Did you ever, in your journey, think that maybe you should have taken a different bike?
Yes. So, very good question. I definitely think folks that are on lighter bikes at times are having more fun because they are able to go places that maybe our skill set with a loaded bike can't do. I'm a bit more than Brandon is game for getting out into rural areas. I think possibly because he feels more responsibility for me if something goes wrong, and I understand that. In a perfect world, I'd have a quiver of motorcycles. Taking a bike like this to Africa in deep sand. It's a different challenge than a 300cc rally bike. So yeah, but this is the only motorcycle I've ever owned. And we are doing the same bike because it's easy to fix them. They have the same parts. So, but it's a beautiful bike. And we have not had a flat tire. We have not had a problem the entire way. Brandon's bike has 100,000 miles on it. It's a 2015. Mine's a 2016 with 55,000 miles on it. And we have had regular maintenance. So, yeah. I started napping more. And we started having more exciting kind of high mountains experiences also. Camping out, where they come and like watch you set up your tent. And things started getting amazing. They've already been amazing all the way down, but to get to Patagonia and Torres del Paine, and it's amazing. So, and pictures don't do it justice. We went through Bolivia and had a hard time finding fuel. That was it, yeah. And I mean, again, we have 8-gallon gas tanks on this. So everybody else has half that. And so for us, we would meet a lot of riders who are carrying extra fuel. Although Brandon ran out of gas once, but we won't want to talk about that. We actually had to buy fuel on the side of the road from some truckers. But yeah, we're really blessed with the bigger tanks. And that's another reason, we picked that bike. So yeah. The wind in Patagonia, everybody talks about it. It is serious. So we had a windy app. Is it 15 till? Is that what I have Brazilian time?
Yeah,
okay.
15 till.
Okay. So what we did is we went all the way down the west side. We went to Bolivia and did not go into northern Chile where the hand is that everybody talks about. We had a choice of either doing the salt flats in Bolivia or doing the Atacama Desert, and we chose Bolivia. We were pushing at that point to get to Ushuaia. So to get that far south, you only have about a 3.5-month window that you are able to physically get there because it's snow. So we were about halfway down the continent at that point, and we knew that there were certain things we're not going to be able to see. You know, Machu Picchu, yes. The Salt Flats, yes. Sorry, we missed the Atacama Desert. We will hopefully come back. Again, the list gets longer. But we had a windy app, and we started learning that you have to look at that app every day to gauge how the speed of the wind is down there. It is pretty treacherous, especially for us. Our heavier bikes are weighed better, so they are more grounded like an anchor. But the consequence is also when it's that strong that it can definitely still take you off the road. I've seen videos of a group of 10, 1200s on the side of the road hiding in the ditch, and they can't even, like for 2 days. I mean, you just can't ride your motorcycle. So we paid a lot of attention to the winds, and we actually happened to hit it really well. When you get an Airbnb and you come out and your bike's on its side because it's so windy, we started actually tying our motorcycles to things at night just to make sure that they would not blow over, even though you're inside a gated compound. And we would also tie them together with opposing kickstands so that if they were pushed in one direction or the other, they were okay. We went all the way down on the Chilean side to Ushuaia, and then in the Carretera Austral, which is a really well-known gravel road. It was amazing. And then we crossed over into Argentina to get to Ushuaia, and we came back up Ruta 40, which is the other classic route. There's an area called Maldito 73, which is a 73-kilometer section that, if you watch anything on YouTube, it is the place that it's very deep gravel, it's very windy and exposed, and people tend to, if you hit it on the wrong day, get into some pretty high consequence there. So we did it on a great day. We were really, really thankful. So you can see how deep the gravel is. You're riding entire truck marks from lorries that are on this road, and it's just really exciting. We had a really great day. We were super thankful. That's how big the rocks are. So it's not like, oh, it's just a gravel road. What are you guys afraid of? They're big roly-polies, and we didn't nap, but we were celebrating that we'd finished that section without injury, and we also felt really accomplished about it. So. And then you see down in Patagonia, this is a Sylvan, a French motorcyclist we hadn't seen in about a month, and we were so excited to see him. We had celebrated Christmas with him in Peru. And then you meet these crazy people that are riding bicycles the entire length that we just did. And I've thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail, and there's a thing called a trail angel where you carry food for other people. And I learned that these people are the true, they are tough. Here I'm on my my fuel-powered bike, and they are literally pedal powering on these same winds and same roads as us. And so I started carrying oranges and chocolates and caramels and whatever I could fit, and they were always so excited. So this is literally our last fuel station before Ushuaia. You never fill up your own fuel in Central or South America. It's always done for you. And so we always were encouraging the guys that fill up our tanks to get on our bikes because they don't often get to. So, and then this is us at the very end. So we got to the famous sign in Ushuaia. I had a bottle of champagne the day before. It had been about 75 degrees and sunny. And then when we were there, it was 45 degrees and howling wind and rain. So we had a little bit of grumpy panties happening that day. We went into town and had a hot pizza, and then came back and actually took better photographs because this is our moment. This is the end of the road. We've done about 23,000 miles at this point. I like to glue things on my bike. Again, I like to make it look a bit unusual. This is a white Jaguar I got in Mexico, and I glued it to the front of the bike. And every country we go through, I add something else to the bike. So she had to get some champagne too. So we decided at that point, let's keep going. So we went all the way up. Oh, sorry. Let me talk about this. Like I said, there were eight or nine women I met the entire ride. More women are riding two up, but women on their own motorcycles, whether they're riding by themselves or riding in a partnership like Brandon and I. We all got to Ushuaia, 8 of us, within a 3-day period of each other. And so I organized a ladies' ride. Ushuaia is the town. There is a gravel road that goes 2 more hours to the lighthouse, which is considered the official end of the continent. And then there's another one that goes over here that goes into a national park. Brandon napped, and I thoroughly went to both places to be able to say I'd ridden to the end of the road. And I organized a women's ride, and so it was really cool. Kathleen Perry, she's on a Royal Enfield, and she is currently just crossed China. She's doing a full round the world in 2 years.
By herself.
Yep, her husband passed away, and she said, I'm hitting the road. Tracy Charles, I don't know if anybody here knows Tracy Charles. There's a couple nods. Tracy Charles was a Canadian. She bought her motorcycle a while ago, but she left Canada 5.5 years ago and just got to Ushuaia, and she picked up a dog in Colombia named Rue, who rides with a pink jacket and goggles. This was a German woman, and it was just the four of us. The other women didn't want to come. So, but that is the very, very end. And to be able to, like I said, walk into Pandora years ago as a woman and be like, I want to buy the biggest bike you have, and I don't even know, like, where's the start button? To then be able to finish with other women who all have different stories was pretty fantastic. So the next step, Brandon and I decided, let's keep going. From Ushuaia, we went all the way north up to Brazil. So we want to continue experiencing roads like this. We want to continue meeting people and adding more stickers to the countries I have been to on my bike. We want to have more ferries because they're kind of sketchy, and it makes for good photos and it's fun. We want to try more food. This was in Brazil, and we happened to show up at a campground, and there were 200 people there having a barbecue on eucalyptus sticks. They'd been cooking for 14 hours, and it was wild boar and goats. And they included us. I mean, nobody spoke English except Brandon spoke Spanish, and one guy spoke English and came over and said, "Come on, get a beer, join us. Let's have a meal." So there's Brandon on the far side. And they walk around and just carve off meat. And if it's undercooked in the middle, they put it back on the cooker. So we want to have more campsites like this that are just dreams. And yes, we have Starlink internet here, so I could call my parents. We want to see more churches. And so we decided, let's go to Africa. So we went all the way up to Brazil, and then back down through Uruguay, Paraguay, and got to Buenos Aires. We did a lot of research to figure out, most people's trip ends there. Most people either go back to Europe there. And we decided, let's go to Africa. We want to go that direction. We looked into shipping containers. We did probably 2.5 months worth of research to see if we could do it cheaper than air freighting with the car motos. When it's all said and done, we went ahead and went with the car motos. Air freighting a bike takes 90 days, and you don't really know what the cost is going to be, and you have to do it yourself. We've never worked with shipping containers before. Dakar Motos, we hired them. The fee for each of us to ship a motorcycle, if you paid cash in Argentina in crisp 100 Blue Note US bills, was $2,700 per bike. So to go across the Darien Gap is about $1,200. If it's on sale, it's $900, depends when you get there. So to do that, we have to wash the bikes. We had to funnel out fuel. We traded these kids that were washing cars free fuel for premium fuel for use of their area. And then we drove. We realized what was funny is we drove and realized we'd siphoned out too much, and I only had 12 miles on my tank, and I had to go 45 miles to Buenos Aires. So we had to buy fuel at the next gas station. And we showed up in Buenos Aires. This is Dakar Motos. This is a husband and wife team that have been doing this for 30 years, dialed. And so he was siphoning fuel out again for us at the airport. And we ride them into pallets here. And then we have to take windshields off, side mirrors. We have to take everything out of the panniers. We couldn't fly with batteries, any liquids, sunscreen. It's very different from going across the Darien. So we learned a lot. It took all day. They bring drug sniffing dogs, and they go through all of your stuff. And so we kind of thought we knew what we were doing, but again, you kind of learn as you go. And to have someone like Dakar be able to walk us through it was really amazing. So that's my bike, and that's us. They bid with different airlines, and they got us a good flight with United Arab Emirates. And so we watched our bikes fly to Qatar. And then they went to Africa, and they're x-rayed in every country they go through. So that's why we couldn't include a lot of items on our bikes. We decided once we got rid of the motorcycles and they were on their way, we were going to go float the Amazon River. It's a lot easier to do that without a motorcycle. So we floated the Amazon, and we've come back down now and spent a week in Rio de Janeiro, and I flew in yesterday. And Brandon will meet me in Cape Town January 5th. So number one, I'm thankful for riding with this man. We definitely have our moments like any good coupling does. At the same time, the things we've been able to discover and experience and encourage for each other has been a real life lesson. So we have agreed we're going to go to Africa. We're going to go Cape Town to Kenya, and then we will see. Right now, there's a lot of countries in Africa you can't get through, so we're kind of landlocked in Kenya. We may have to fly to Oman. We may have to fly to Turkey. We really don't know yet. We were looking at going over the West Coast, but getting right now through Nigeria is a bit questionable. So people are doing it, but I think we aren't looking for that much adventure. So in some regards, our last photo is from compared to when I was in my parents' driveway. We look like we kind of know what we're doing, one day at a time. And then when we get to Africa, it's going to be completely different again. Different cultures, different foods, big overlanding community, not as much of a motorcycle community once you leave South Africa. There is no WhatsApp group for Africa at all. So I've started one, and I have about 50 people in it now of just motorcyclists, and we're just starting to kind of connect and network and learn from each other. So yeah, we're excited, but we will 6 to 8 months in Africa and then get to Europe and leave the bikes. We may leave the motorcycles in Africa and come home and work for a while. It just kind of depends how it plays out. So there you go. Yes. Yeah. Phone numbers in case one of us goes down, and yeah, contact numbers. So any questions for anybody? We have definitely learned. We both navigate now with dummy phones. Brandon had his phone stolen in Bolivia, and that was an also interesting experience for us to try to work with a cell phone company in the US to get you reprogrammed from afar. It doesn't work. And yeah, you just learn as you go, right? I mean, I haven't had a flat tire yet. When that happens, I will learn. I know. He hasn't either. So. But anybody can do this. It's time and money and courage, right? I mean, and we're very lucky that we set up our home to be able to facilitate a trip like this, and that I have support from family and friends that say, go, do it. And at any point that we decide this isn't fun anymore, or Brandon wants to keep going, or I want to keep going, that'll be a discussion. If I need to come home for any reason, then that'll be a discussion, and we'll just keep figuring it out. You meet people that do round the world trips in 1 calendar year. You meet people that take 30 years to do it. So we're just picking it off as we go along. This was in Rio de Janeiro last week. Yeah, up on Sugarloaf Mountain. Yeah.
So I know you have friends that have traveled all over the world on their bicycles. Do those two things interact at all as you're riding? Can you use some of the things that they use to get through places?
No, I mean, it's what we've learned is there's 3 kind of distinct cultures. You've got the motorcycle culture, you have the bicycling, road biking culture, and their distances are so different from ours. And then you have the overlanding community, which a Unimog or a giant Mercedes van is going to be able to do roads differently than what we are able to do. And so we've learned over time that you can learn from other people that have gone through different areas, but ultimately being able to communicate with other motorcyclists is pretty important, because even if it's Suzuki, Yamaha, BMW, everybody, you still are like, hey, I need to find a hostel or somewhere I can park my bike in Lima, Peru that has secure parking. Where do I go? So I think on these groups, there's always a debate on tires, and there's always a debate on oil, and there's always a debate on whose bike is the best. But we're all doing it, right? And having fun.
ride on a given day?
So it depends. We, in a perfect world, we'd ride, well, and again, it depends the kind of road. In Mexico, sometimes we would go 100 miles and it would take us 9 or 10 hours. There's 500 topes, speed bumps on the road. In Peru, if there was a rock fall, I mean, you saw some of that. But we feel differently now because our only push was to get to Ushuaia. And so we had to cover some ground in certain areas where we didn't want to go that fast, but we knew our window was closing. I would say for me and for Brandon, a perfect day would be about 150 miles. And then you get to go to this next cool town and, see whatever it is there is to see. Our shortest day was 0.7 because we moved to a different campsite and we liked it there. And then our longest day, we had a 400+ mile day in northern Mexico. And that was hard, but it was because we were trying to get somewhere, those reasons. So. But we're tired. You're tired if it's hot or cold. So.
How did you keep up with the cash?
Cash. So Brandon is learning to online bank right now. He likes to carry cash. So that.
Because I'm sure not everywhere you can just swipe a card.
No, and we tended to pay like gas pumps. We aren't using credit cards now. We are like Argentina, Brazil, very very modern, very secure. So, but in other countries we were using cash only, and we were trading out with hawkers on the street a lot because you can get a better rate than you can going to an ATM. And again, it's different by country a lot of times. But we were really lucky to be carrying a lot of cash, which allowed us to pay to car motos in cash and get a 10% discount, which was $600. So we wouldn't have been able to get that cash in Argentina to be able to save that money. But that we don't have much more cash, so that's why I'm home. What's that?
You don't have an ATM on everything.
No, and different countries are different. Argentina has changed so much in the last 6 months. They've doubled in cost compared to when we were there 6 months ago because of various political climates that are changing. So, yeah. Yes.
I know you kind of touched on the generosity of people around the world. A little boy that offers juice box. I know in several presentations I've heard of overlanders. The common theme is generally the people with the least are the most generous to give whatever they have. Is that your
Yes.
experience?
Absolutely. I mean, I've dropped Brandon's actually dropped his bike more than me. But I remember being in Mexico. I took a right-hand turn and I dropped my bike in a town that we were not feeling comfortable in. And before I could even stand up and turn my bike off, I had 4 men who were trying to lift my bike for me. And were just, brushing me off. And are you, and there's a level of kind of generosity and culture that exists whether you can or cannot speak the language. It's easier if you can communicate. But I mean, Brandon spends a couple months every year in Baja, Mexico as a vaquero, as a cowboy. And we were riding along one day and he saw a group of about 500 sheep being herded in the Andes in Argentina. And he pulled over because he really wanted to ride horses with these guys. And, he's pulling over on a motorcycle that they could buy their whole farm with. And they invited him to camp. I wasn't with him at the time. I'd come home to work. They invited him to stay for 4 days and they killed a sheep for him and celebrated him. And that generosity exists everywhere, whether you're poor or not. And I mean, we saw Venezuelans all over walking north, and we were shared with by them and we shared with them, and it is humbling. So yeah.
How's your outlook on life changing? Does it make you appreciate human beings or?
Yeah, it's allowed me to be, I mean, I've traveled a lot before, but I think it's rejuvenating every time because it is so humbling. I mean, to see, we're in high mountains of Peru and they want to bring their children over with their llama herd to share milk with us because we're camping out and they've never seen a tent before, and then they want to have us all the kids sit on the bike, and we got these pictures with, all these, and I think that humbleness when I have so much and other people are rich in experience and rich in joy. And so that has been really good for us to experience. And what I understand also is when we go to Africa, it's going to be kind of next level too. So just humble. So, yeah. Well, thanks. Well, one day at a time. So, but yeah, that's it. So, if anybody wants a sticker or to follow us on Instagram, that would be great. And on with the adventure. That's kind of our philosophy. So, and it all started here at Pandora. I literally walked in and said, I want to. I couldn't even pick it out in the store. I didn't know which one was a 1200, and they encouraged me. So, great shop. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Yay.
Wanna find trouble?